But wetlands for Haskell is that they would cover up a lot of the kids' tracks when they'd go through. Be hard to track them because the water would pick it up, and then some can get away and some get caught. But that's where they used to meet their parents.
All the Indian, it was this giant experiment to take all the Indian children that they could manage to get hold of and bring them into the boarding schools and not allow them to do anything associated with their own cultures, submerge them in families, good Christian value families, and drain every element of Indian out of them.
Represented a place to escape the prying eyes of administration, a place where maybe students could speak their own languages with each other, a place where they could perhaps even engage in traditional ceremonies, religious practices.
The wetlands was a big part of Haskell because that's where they got a lot of, they grew a lot of things. And they had their own garden on here. The kids had to tend the garden and had to learn had to grow up. So anyway, we go from here all the way down to Wakarusa. And then when the parents knew where their kids were, they used to come over here to the wetlands, to what they call Baker now, but that's all used to be Haskell. And they used to visit their kids, go over there and see their kids. Take them if they could. If not, then the school would find them and then bring them back. But that's where the meeting place for the parents, for the kids, when they got to see their lonely and just wanted nothing to do with Haskell. Why it was made, why Haskell was here.
Really think about that historical kind of context that it represents, because the school being opened in the late 1880s as part of the federal government's program to train Indians, to assimilate them, to strip away their cultures, and to kind of cookie cutter them into the mainstream dominant American culture, makes us realize that this place was not only very different than it is today, but that it was trying to do something which culturally had a very negative effect.
For most people in this town, this was the least healthy place in the entire county. They consider it, if they had to give land to the federal government in order to have a boarding school, this was the most worthless land they had to give up. And that was because people in the late 19th century were convinced that wetlands were wastelands, that they were unhealthy places, and that by giving up that land, they weren't giving up a whole lot. They had already established the Douglas County Poor Farm on the south side of the wetlands, again, because nobody's going to want to go to the poor farm and live off the public dole if they have to live beside a smelly old swamp. And so again, that just reinforces the attitude of the people that were here when Haskell was established.
So the wetlands, if you look at old pictures, I mean, kid you not, if you look at old pictures, there's a few of them around campus, you see tons of kids. I mean, tons of kids. They say they used to stack them in Pocahontas, eight to a room, 4 high. And Pocahontas wasn't even finished. You could still see outside. And in them days, I guess winters used to be pretty bad. So if you look at all the kids that attended Haskell and died here, then you look at the cemetery, you can only, 50? Not even that. I mean, they're all perfectly lined. So when you go out there, there's a lot of things out there dealing with the kids. So it means a lot to Haskell. There's a lot of, I guess, my sister was saying there's a lot of large graves. Because in Pocahontas, when you got sick, back in them days, if you got sick, they didn't care. They stuck you in, because Pocahontas was, downstairs was kind of infirmary. They stuck you downstairs and they left you. Said, okay, we'll just wait for him to die. Wait for her to die. All right, when they died, those two little rooms, when you go downstairs, they were supposed to be the coldest, and that's where they put the bodies until summertime, springtime, warm up enough to dig the grave. They put them in there, and there'd be a door. There's only 2 rooms down in Pocahontas. You come down the stairs, and there's 2 little rooms, and that's where they used to put bodies.
It's an incredibly dramatic and traumatic time for the tribes, and there's no news except an occasional student who comes in who may know something about what's happening at home. There's no news of what's happening at home. So you get down there to find out what's going on.
So when students came here, for instance, in the fall of 1884, 22 students, their parents, in some cases, came along with them and stayed with them for a while to kind of make sure that they were being treated correctly. And I think that's important too, because once those parents left, and then once the first superintendent left, Haskell turned into kind of a military institution, very much a military regime with cadet formations and reveille to wake them up and taps to put them to bed and drills out on the quad and things like that. So it became a very rigid kind of place, and a place that Indian children for the most part wouldn't have been accustomed to living in that type of environment.
If you can get down to the wetland and find somebody that can get a message back to your folks, that's a much more direct route. So this becomes their Twitter, this becomes their Facebook, this becomes their way of, their best, most effective way to get a message back to their folks about what they really feel about being at Haskell. So that whole area becomes a major component of how people resist having all the Indian drained away from them when they come to the boarding schools in the early years.
That should be left alone, should be not disturbed. They don't, progress doesn't care. They just want to build that road. Used to be a bridge to go nowhere, but anyway, I guess they get the funding to do it. So culture-wise, it's just a lot of, to Haskell, it's just a lot of unmarked graves. A lot of kids come here and lost their life, died here, and then for you to go digging around, I just go like here, go to Lawrence. Go to the city of Lawrence and dig up their cemetery. Let's put a road through there. No, hell no, you can't do that. Why do it over here?
Now, of course, we have the medicine wheel, and we have the sweat lodges, and we have other things that are out on these pieces of the wetlands, as well as, our partners, our natural partners, the birds, the four-leggeds, and all of the other animals, the insects and so forth that are out there that we desperately need to protect, especially given that historical context and the fact that piece by piece this has been taken away from us. So I think that also is why it's really important to think about this as being first and foremost historically part of who we are, but also that we're the caretakers, the stewards of that legacy of Haskell tradition, and in a larger sense of Native traditions as a whole.